In 1935, Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act. It established the rights of workers to organize into unions and bargain collectively. But farm workers were left out. 30 years later, the national movement for farm workers' rights started in the fields near Delano, California. It started first with Filipinos who were joined by Mexican farm workers. They wanted fair treatment, a place to go to the bathroom, clean water to drink, sick days, and living wages. The same things other American workers had. A strategy to use boycotts instead of strikes made the difference in effort. United Farm Worker leaders enlisted the help of everyone from longshoremen in the Oakland docks to housewives in the East Coast supermarkets. They urged consumers nationwide not to buy grapes and to boycott supermarket chains that sold them. Celebrities joined the protests, and Senator Robert Kennedy held congressional hearings bringing national attention to the cause. The 5-year fight included pickets and a 300-mile march to Sacramento led by Cesar Chavez. The UFW leader also held a hunger strike to ensure that his followers used only non-violent means to fight for their cause. The boycott eventually resulted in union contracts being signed for 60,000 farm workers.
We work out in the dirt, okay? We work outside. This is a field work. They work in the wintertime when it's really cold, and they work in the summertime when it's really hot. Table grapes are the most labor-intensive product in the valley. If you had to go use a bathroom, you had to find a tree. You had to find a bush. They were treating you subhuman, okay? Back then, if they sprayed the fields, they didn't have to put a sign, pesticide sprayed yesterday. Back then, they didn't post anything. They didn't even provide water.
I began to realize what other minority people had discovered, that the only answer, the only hope was in organizing.
Him and Dolores and the other founders were going to build a strong organization first. So their plan was to build this big, strong union with services for poor people, but that changed in 1965 when Filipino farm workers went out on strike.
They struck in Arvin. They shut down 3 labor camps. Then after that, it just escalated, and it came to Delano. They started walking out, and that's how the start got going.
You see somebody, walking 300 miles from Delano to Sacramento, it's long and hard, and it communicates to people that like this determination. He says, because when they respect you, then they'll pay you a just wage, and they'll treat you like a human being and not an implement of like an agricultural tool.
I think that what we do need is some federal legislation which will be comparable to the legislation that we passed in the 1930s for other workers in this country.
I covered at a time when there was a court injunction against the mass picketing, and they would go into the fields to be arrested. And I've interviewed Cesar Chavez himself, and we talk about what his next move in tactics, because this was a lot about tactics. They were going from field to field in Fresno County, and what they were trying to do was overwhelm the jail because they didn't have enough jail space, so they had to take them out to the Honor Farm, and ultimately the charges were dropped as they just couldn't process all those people through the court system.
Well, the reason that we had to do a grape boycott was because the growers got injunctions, which is a court order that said we could not have more than 5 people on a picket line. That meant that the employers could bring in strike breakers very easily because the fields are so big, and the people that they brought in would never know that there was a strike going on. And the other thing that they would do is every time we went out to talk to the workers that were making the strike, they would arrest us. For a period of time, there had been a bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama with Rosa Parks. Both Cesar and myself were devotees of Gandhi. We had read everything about Gandhi, and in India, this is how the Indians were able to get their independence also, is by boycotting. And so we sort of copied that tactic of doing a boycott. The farm workers went all the way from Toledo and Fresno and Bakersfield, all the way to New York City. They went to Chicago, just all over the United States. That farm workers that went on radio stations and television stations, would go to churches, to labor organizations, to community groups, women's organizations, and ask everybody, please don't shop at any stores that carry grapes. And this is how it became a national movement. And then they would also picket. Managers of the stores, they didn't want all these people walking in front of their stores with signs that said boycott the store because they have grapes, so they would take the grapes off.
It did affect our family because we were growing table grapes from Delano to Madera. And when you can't sell your grapes, it has a negative effect on your business. Grape boycott was not done directly against us, but would go to the supermarkets back on the East Coast, and they would picket the supermarkets, so the supermarkets would not buy the grapes. They were doing things within the grocery store, such as loading up the baskets with all kinds of food and taking them to the checkout counters and walking away. They would slice their meat packages. So as much as people believe it was a nice, calm, quiet boycott, it was very antagonistic to both the consumer, to the grocery store chain, and the resulting was to the growers because we couldn't sell our grapes.
And we also got a lot of celebrities like Gloria Steinem, who's a very famous feminist leader. We got movie stars like Jane Fonda and Sam Waterston, and a lot of the politicians, like Ted Kennedy, who was a senator. And everywhere they went, they asked people to boycott grapes and later on to boycott lettuce. And this is how we got the growers to sit down and bargain with the farm workers.
Well, after the Grape Boycott, we were forced to sign a union contract. You couldn't sell a box of grapes if it did not have a stamp of the eagle on the end of the box. And at that point, we signed a union contract, and all of a sudden, now we're negotiating with the union individuals. In our case, it was Gilbert Padilla and Dolores Huerta. And I sat in on those conversations, and so that was after the boycott, and that was our first contract. And what many people don't realize, that was before the LRB.
Only got some contracts, and they improved the working conditions, and they had clean drinking water in the fields and other kinds of facilities in the workday. But even now, it's a tough job. It's a very difficult job, and we still have issues of heat-related illnesses in the field in the middle of the summer when it's 112 and people are working. And
there is a lot of work to be done. Only California and Hawaii are the only two states that have good laws for farm workers. And throughout the United States, farm workers do not have the right to organize into a union to this day.
Success of that first boycott wasn't the end. It was only the start of a long struggle that eventually led to California lawmakers passing the Agricultural Labor Relations Act in 1975. The new law gave collective bargaining rights to the state's farm workers, similar to the National Labor Relations Act.